Yes, I am a Christian, and I'm also married to a beautiful woman. I have over 500,000 subscribers here on YouTube, and I no longer have to work for money because I got financially free by the age of 26. But just being a Christian is one thing, but I'm also a man, and it is a good thing to be a man. And that's why today I'm going to talk about the book that every single Christian man must read, and that's going to be It Is Good to Be a Man by Michael Foster. You know, when you go to a lot of churches today, it's kind of directed in a very feminine way, and it almost makes you feel like you have to pick between your masculinity and being a Christian. But those two ideas or options, they are not true, and it almost feels like the entire world is against men. And that's why this video is so important, because I took away 5 main ideas from this book that I'm actually going to share with you guys, but I highly recommend you still read this book once you are done. Let's get right into the video. The first idea is going to be your mission is not your wife. The mission in life is not to go out there and get a wife, and you see that across everything in our culture. It kind of shows that you have the knight and you have the queen, you have the lady, and the knight or the guy goes ahead and gets the lady, and then boom, he accomplishes his dream and everything ends, okay? However, as a Christian, we don't see that in the creation story. We see first that God makes Adam and gives him a mission to actually do. And while he's basically naming all the animals and so on and doing his mission, well, God creates for him an equal helper. Okay, he makes a helper for Adam, and that helper is his wife. It is Eve. Eve is there to help him on his mission, to magnify his mission. And that's why the author says in the book, men should generally have a mission before they seek a wife to magnify it. Women will generally desire a man who is already on a mission, a man who can carry her along because he is already going somewhere. And a lot of men, their only mission is to get a wife. And when they actually get the wife, do you know what they do? They make that wife their mission, and their only thing they're focused on is basically on their wife, making sure she's happy and everything is going great in the family. Is that a bad thing? The answer is no, but your wife is not your mission, okay? And that's why we see a lot of deification of women in our culture, where they're almost like gods. You know, everything you do is for women. You know, your wife, make her happy, happy wife, happy life. That's not what really like scripture actually shows. A wife is there to actually help you on your mission. The role of a woman, naturally by design of God, is to actually help you and magnify you with the things you're actually doing. And a woman obviously can help you doing the things that you cannot do. You cannot bear children. You may put seed, but she will actually be the one actually doing that work for the most part. But that's the big problem. And that's what we're actually seeing. And here's the consequence when you actually make a wife your mission. Here's what the author says. Without fathers and brothers to push him on a mission, a young man's instincts, if he wants to avoid fornication, push him into marriage instead. But the need for mission does not disappear, nor the need to validate his manhood. So without fathers and brothers to guide him into a larger goal and validate him as a man, he tends to fill this void with his wife. See, I'm a man because I got a woman. I achieved my mission and got a wife. She wants to have sex with me. This proves that I'm a man. This creates many unhappy marriages. The more a man relies on his wife to validate his masculinity, and the more his direction in his life centers around her, the more needy of her he becomes. But the more needy a man becomes of a woman, the less attractive he is to her. Neediness signals the opposite of dominion, the opposite of responsibility and authority and ability. The man begins to treat his wife not as a helper but as a mother. This creates a vicious spiral of increasing dissatisfaction, less sex, less togetherness, less sense of mission, less confidence in each other, and for the man, less mastery over his world and less belief in his manhood. in his manhood. Hence the Hollywood trope of the buffoon dad who is functionally just another one of the children. And that's exactly what we see a lot of today. Even in culture, how are men portrayed? They're portrayed as buffoons, right? But the overall picture here, guys, is that the big mission in life is going to be to do what God put you here to do and to have a sense for that. And then you get a wife to actually magnify that. But you should not be deifying what it is to actually get a wife, because that's not what we see in scripture. We see Adam, and then we see God gives him Eve to magnify his mission. The mission is not Eve, okay? It's very important. So the Lord says in Genesis 2:18, the Lord said, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make him a helper suitable for him." So when you make your wife the mission, that's going to have a lot of negative effects in your marriage. You should know that. Now, the second idea that Michael Foster, the author of this book, talks about is that if you control the head of the house, you control a nation. If you basically destroy the head of the household, then what happens is you have a nation in chaos. You have no leadership. Now, who is the head of the household? The head of the household is the husband. It is you as a man. And that's very important for you to actually know and for you to take your role up with pride. And how do we know that? Because Jesus is the head of the church, like the husband is the head of the wife. You will see that over and over and over again in the Bible. And there are strategies that the enemies has basically done against young men throughout history. We see that a lot in the book of Exodus, but mostly the author found 3 ways to actually point that out in this book and how it's happened historically. And these 3 ways, I'm actually going to read it to you guys right now, is first, young men are always the target of an evil patriarchy because God has made them to rule. They are the threat to existence rule. Therefore, evil patriarchy always try to do one of 3 things. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I will go over what each of them actually is. Number 1 is going to be the evil patriarchy is going to try to harness them. Obviously, if you have something that's very powerful, like young men and men, well, if you can harness that power, you can use it for your own plan and your own idea. So we see this here. Most nations have done this to some degree through enculturation and education, especially patriotism, military service, and formal schooling. So that's exactly how you try to, harness the energy and harness these men for their own purposes. The second thing they actually do is if they can't harness you, they try to pacify you. Now, here's what they do, okay? This can be done by putting them to work as slaves, as Pharaoh did, but often it's by offering them bread and circuses, fruitless pursuits to escape into, rather than doing the hard work of fighting. Now, here's something that you should know, okay? So how are we being pacified today as young men? Well, men watch a lot more TV than women. We use a lot of cell phones. We're looking at a lot of pornography. All these things are just methods of pacifying men. Now, what is the last thing that the enemy does when he can't harness you, when he can't pacify you? He tries to destroy them. And we see it right here, right? So young men who cannot be harnessed or pacified must be crushed. They're too dangerous to an evil patriarchy to be allowed to live. These words sound harsh, but we see that all throughout the Bible. We see it in Exodus when Pharaoh could not basically harness them, could not pacify them. He started to basically order that these young men basically be crushed, right? And we also saw when Jesus was about to be born, what that king basically said, right? To have all the kids that are 2 years and younger basically be crushed. That's what basically happens. I do want to point out one more thing when it comes to pacify. I want to quote the author here. He says, "Men who are hooked up like junkies to the dopamine drip of virtual fornication and fake dominion are worthless for the task of being fruitful in real life and imposing genuine order on the world." Okay, that on their world. I mean, that's very true. If that's all we do, we seek fake dominion in what? In video games. Are video games bad? The answer is no. But when the only progress you're making in life is leveling up virtually, obviously that's not good. And the Bible says in 1 Peter 5:8-10, it says, "Your enemy the devil prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of suffering." When you're trying to be a young man who is not going to let yourself be harnessed, pacified, or destroyed, you have to understand that when you are facing all of these difficulties, you're not facing them alone. And a man solves problems with the resources available to him, including prayer. And you have to know that there are other men facing the same exact issue as you are. And that's why it's so important to surround yourself with men that get the mission. More on that later. Now, the third idea that we actually find in this book is that we actually have a mandate from God as men, and we have instructions on who we are, what we're here to do, and how to actually go about it. Okay, so it's very important we actually know this, because a lot of people, a lot of men specifically, we're just walking around roaming and not knowing why we're here, what we're supposed to be doing, and how to actually do it. And when you don't know those things, you tend to find your identity in other things, and you want to be very careful with that. So we're here to basically do three main things aside from your mission also that God put you there to do, but we're here to be fruitful. Being fruitful basically means producing good works to reflect the image of God. You know, so when you do good works, that means something, and that tells a story about your God. The second thing we're actually here to do is to actually multiply, to have children, and to make more image God bearers. So when you have, for example, children and you raise them up in the Lord, you're raising also image bearers of the Lord that do and produce fruitful work of good for the Lord. All those things matter, okay? And then lastly, we are here to take dominion, okay? To have dominion over your world, what you're supposed to be doing. You know how in Hollywood, we always see, for example, that the only way you can actually do anything meaningful if it's this big, if it's massive, or it has a big impact. We don't see that biblically. That's not what biblically we're actually told to be doing. Everything you do for the Lord has a big impact. You don't have to be a big pastor. You don't have to be the biggest YouTuber. You don't have to be the biggest salesman. Those are not the reasons why you're actually here. But you are supposed to be having dominion and control over the world that you actually have, in a sense, whether it's small or whether it's large, whether you got a lot or you got a little, okay? Now, here's what the author basically says. He says, Adam was told to be fruitful and to multiply. This was the central to his work. In order to subdue the world, he had to first fill it. How do you subdue the world? How do you take dominion of the world when it's just you? The answer is no, you really can't, right? So you have to go ahead and multiply. Now, there is something and some fun facts that I have noticed throughout history, and it's that if you actually look at history, throughout the 1800s to 1960 specifically, 160-year span, basically less than 2 generations for the most part. Well, you see that in the 1800s, people on average had about 7 kids per household. And then in 1960, you see that number drop from 7 to about 1.94, if I'm not mistaken. I actually asked this question to AI, and you just saw basically how people just have less and less and less and less kids. And the main reason is because during 1960, we actually had birth control be introduced. And one of the women that actually was big on this was basically the founder of Planned Parenthood. Her name is Margaret Sanders, and she says, okay, birth control is the first important step for women must take control, the goal of their freedom. It is the first step she must take to be a man's equal. It is the first step they must both take towards human emancipation. The truth is that although this woman might have that perspective, that is not what we see biblically. Biblically, we see that women and men are equal, okay? They are both sharers in the inheritance that God has for us. We are of equal value. However, we do have different roles. And when you basically try to equate somebody's value by their role, well, if you have a bigger role, you're more important than me, you are better than me, you have more value than me. That is not true. That is not what God shows. Just because, for example, the man is the head of the household and the woman is the one that magnifies and helps and basically he might give her a home, but she's the one that's going to be actually building the home in a sense. That is awesome. That is amazing. And that is not less valuable than what the man is doing. Okay, so you should do some research on this woman and everything she stands for. But obviously, one big factor in people not having as many kids is that, okay, it's not just, for example, cost of living going up and things that are more expensive. A big part, it is birth control. That was a massive change. Now, if we are supposed to multiply and to take dominion and to produce fruit, then why aren't we doing that anymore? Why is our main focus not on that, but our main focus now is on career and making our wives happy? That's very important to ask and questions to actually look at. I really recommend you read this book because it will open up your eyes a lot. And I'm going to read this Bible verse here where it says in Genesis 1:28, it says, "And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves in the earth." That is what God put us here to do, okay? So whenever you're wondering, like, what am I here to do? That's exactly what you are here to do. So it is a good thing that you want to take dominion. That's why whenever we watch movies as men where somebody is conquering something or achieving something great, we get that like that tingling feeling, or like we feel so emotional about it. It's because that is what we're built for. Those feelings are good. God put them there. Now, the fourth idea is that men need brotherhoods. We need fraternity. And as a loner that I've been for a very long time, I've been learning this more and more. You know, we see basically on the media and just like society as a whole that the strong, powerful men are the ones that are loners. They're the Batmans, the people that don't really talk to people, that don't have that many relationships. But the truth is that if a man is by himself, he's very easy to take down. And having brothers with you that understand you, well, these brothers are going to push you, to compliment you, and to also motivate you. But more importantly, they're also going to pull you back when you're going to do something very stupid. Having a brotherhood, seeking fraternity is very important, and it is worth the sacrifice to actually go ahead and get. Don't be trapped in the idea that, is always presented, for example, when a man wants to hang out with other men, he's just hanging out with the boys and doing poker and doing those nonsense. It's not true, It's about having a community and fraternity of support, a support network that get the mission, that are moving towards the mission with you also. And here's what the author actually says here. Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. For if either of them falls, the one will lift up his companion. But woe to the one who falls when there is not another to lift him up. Furthermore, if two lie down together, they keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? And if one can overpower him who is alone, two can resist him. A cord of three strands is not quickly torn apart. This is in Ecclesiastes 4, verse 9 to 12. And then the author says here, this has an application to both fraternity and to marriage, but the explicit context is to fraternity. Good male friends will support you, compliment you, shield you, raise you up, push you forward, pull you back when necessary, hone you, critique you, and ultimately sanctify you. Men need men. Find each other. Take risks. It's worth the reward. That said, not all criticism and correction you will receive is likely to be well intended. Some will not be even remotely true. But what the author is basically saying here is that brotherhood is important, and we don't hear that anymore. It almost seems like brotherhood is just about having people to talk with, to understand you. But brotherhood is a very powerful thing. If you are with strong brothers, they will basically lift you up. They will help you resist. They will defend. They will instruct you. They will, do a lot of things with you. This sounds very powerful. And that is what you should be trying to seek as men, to have other men around you. I know men that they feel most comfortable when they are around women. I don't feel like that. I used to feel like that a lot earlier in my life. I just felt a lot more comfortable around women. It was like a lot more easier. But now it's like I want to be around men. I want to talk with men. And the only woman I'm actually interested in talking to is just with my wife. Now, here's the fifth and most important idea I got from this book, okay? And it's that man is not a zero. Even in churches, sometimes we are portrayed as being zero, just being completely bad, just being nothing good about us. But the truth is that sin corrupts our nature, but grace restores it. Masculinity is a good thing. You wanting to multiply and have many children is a good thing. You wanting to subdue and take dominion is a good thing. All these feelings you have, these are powerful things. Sin can corrupt it, make you a macho, terrible person, but grace restores it, makes you a strong head of a family that has a sense of mission. And when you do have a family, now you create a community of like-minded God image bearers. And you even see this, for example, in many churches where men are basically put down and looked down upon. And you have all these pastors who just spend all their time trying to put men down and defend women as a whole. Okay, now here's something that I will say: your value comes from being an image bearer of God. You have value because of that. So even when we see on TV that men are portrayed, like the author said before, just as one of the kids, stupid and dumb and always just like falling and good for nothing just for making a check, the answer is that's not true. And in Genesis 1:26-27 it says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." That's why you seek dominion. That's why you're important, because God made you in his image. Okay, that's where your value comes from. Now, here's what the author says here, specifically about the churches and what we actually find in some churches. He says, thus we find ourselves in the church effeminate, where men may either check in their testicles with the usher in skinny jeans, sign a waiver promising not to upset the women, and softly groan about their boyfriend Jesus, or they may be escorted to the door by a mob of violent heroes who will defend milady honor at any cost. Thanks to the white knight, men may lay aside their masculinity, or they may lay aside their Christianity. Of course, this is not a real choice. Christianity is innately masculine, but framing is everything. And so if you present men with this dilemma, they will try to choose one of the horns. And since it is a false dilemma, whichever way they choose to go, the outworking are disastrous. They will always end up leaning towards one of the two theological errors. And that's exactly what we see in some churches. Now, I do have to tell you something. There are good churches with excellent leadership, with men, with excellent community there. Okay, these churches do exist. So if you find yourself in one of these churches, you have three options. One is you reform the church by talking to the pastors, talking to the leadership, and trying to basically get things in order as biblically as possible. Two is you basically just leave and go to another church that's actually good. Or third, you plant your own church. Those are the three options, but I would not stay in a church where that's what's actually going on. And I have seen those churches, but I also have seen good churches. Now, there are no perfect churches, and that's why reform is such an important part of being a member of a church, right? So you should keep that in mind. But again, it is a good thing to be masculine. Now, there is one last idea I want to share with you guys that I actually developed as I actually read this book, and I actually want to read it to you guys, but it is renewing your mind. As I grew up, I kind of figured out that a lot of my ideas and my dreams, they were not my own. These were ideas and dreams that were put in me by society. And the more I read the Bible and the more I read these Christian books, ones like these that are directed towards men, and just other Christian books, it changes me, it restores me, and it gives me a lot of confidence. And here's what I'll say, okay? Think about this. It's how we live. we spend 40 hours a week, or some of us even 60 hours a week in a job. We come home, watch TV, maybe spend time with our 1 or 2 kids or 1.5 kids, and maybe spend some time with our wife, okay? And the kids have their own schedule, they have their own life, and it kind of feels like we don't know anything about our kids for the most part. And the mom also has her own life. There is no unity. Where is the unity in this family unit? There's none. There's just a group of people that basically just have their own separate lives and work towards one goal, which is to sustain the house in a way. But that's not unity. And I appreciate all those men that go against the grain, that, you know, work as much as it possibly can and not over excess so they can spend time with their family. For all the people that are homeschooling if possible, all the women that are teaching if possible, and all the people that are having as many kids as they can if possible. I think that's super powerful. I think that's super awesome. A lot of things are wrong with the world, but I do recommend that you read your Bible, you read books like this, and you find brotherhood, because complaining about it does nothing. So I could have made a video just complaining about all these things, but this book provides a lot of solutions. It tells you exactly what to do, and that's why Michael Foster's book, It Is Good to Be a Man, is one of my favorite books. So that's a lot, okay? And I've read a lot of books. So thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. TommyBryson out.